Welcome to this edition of Bitcoin Brief. It is Tuesday, August 11th. I'm your host, Christine Lee, a journalist, and here joining us is Tone Vays, our Bitcoin educator, trader, and consultant, and our author of Programming Bitcoin, Jimmy Song, who gives us the lowdown on all things tech. All right, guys, so how's it going on your end of the world, Tone?
Good, good. I just agreed to come out to Texas, and I will be speaking along with Jimmy Song at BitBlock Boom coming up in about 2 weeks.
All right. So
I'm not looking forward to flying in a mask or going through an airport. And if it's a real pain in the ass, I think I'm done flying for like unless of Bali. If when Bali, I'll fly out to Bali for the conference, but it's just like the whole inconvenience and how crazy people are with COVID is just doesn't want to make me go anywhere.
Yeah, we are seeing a couple of conferences in the blockchain Bitcoin world starting to pop up. Things are starting to slowly creep back to normal, not really quite near anything close as it should or, should be, but we see a little bit here and there creeping back up. How about you, Jimmy? How's things going?
Well, I will also be at BitBlock Boom at the end of August. To my knowledge, that's pretty much the only conference that's actually going to happen this fall, despite everybody trying to kind of push it. We'll see. This might set a precedent. There's a good tradition in Bitcoin of price rallying when a lot of people are gathered in one place for a conference. So I do hope that tradition continues, but we'll see if that happens.
All right, excellent. And also making headlines, we're seeing the market's down today. Bitcoin is down. Also, Biden finally picked his VP candidate. It's Kamala Harris. She's the first Black American candidate for vice president. And yeah, so taking a look at some of the Bitcoin headlines, I'm going to start screen share. And okay, our first story. Can you guys see my screen there?
Yeah.
All right, so we've got a proposal on Bitcoin Cat's fork experiment. So this is a Medium article from Hypo Yang. A few days ago, I put forward an idea about Bitcoin Cat's fork, which stirred a lot of discussion in the Chinese community. Bitcoin Cat is a fork coin based on Bitcoin Cash, and it is likely to be born on November 15th. Now, everything remains uncertain or may be terminated at any time. This article is to provide more details on some of my current thoughts. For full discussions with the community as enough consensus, if reached, can push Bitcoin Cat to go online. That would be a very interesting experiment. Now, Hypo chose the word cat for the project because for one hand, cat sounds similar to cash, and on the other, cat is a cute and common pet. Hypo says he once raised a cat and named it Satoshi. Choosing the word cat as a name is quite interesting, making the project easy to remember, spread, and further attract the public attention. Dogecoin survived and has developed well in the fierce competition precisely because of its unique name. The crypto market already has Dogecoin, but no cat coin, leaving a huge market opportunity for us. Okay, Jimmy, I see you laughing there. But Tone, I'm wondering about, do they have the foundation to split Bitcoin Cash off like this? And what do you think about the market opportunity for a cat coin?
Is this real? He's not trolling, right, Jimmy? This is.
I don't think so. I think they're talking about it in the Bitcoin Cash places. So I think it's actually real.
So look, when you read that, I like that. I chose the word cat. Like he's talking about basically when you read this proposal, it doesn't sound that different to me than most white papers. Like when you read like the Steemit white paper, for example, when it came out, and it's talking about how crabs are pulling each other, to stay in the bucket. I mean, these are the kinds of things that they have in their white paper. So talking about, I'm going to do this because I once owned a cat makes perfect sense. It is completely in line with the logic and reasoning of most white papers in the crypto space. This is what they sound like. When people tell me to go read the white paper and research, this is what it usually is. This is the end result of researching. So I'm not surprised that Bitcoin Cash is forking again, because when this disaster of a project initially started, obviously they created a precedent that makes forking okay. And when the first fork happened, they were very proud that they had 5 development teams. What they didn't realize, and what we pointed out back in 2017, that 5 development teams will lead to 5 additional coins, or 4 additional coins, because one of them would be yours. So we already saw the first fork of BCash that gave us BSV, and I believe 2 of the developer teams went to BSV, and I think 3 remained with BCash. And now one of those BCash developer teams is splitting again. And I think they'll be down to 2 developer teams, Bitcoin ABC and Bitcoin Unlimited. And I think each one has like half a developer working on it, like part-time maybe. So sooner or later, they will split one more time, so that each of those initial 5 developer teams of BCash will end up with their own coin. Now, it's also hilarious that they're choosing the ticker BCC, which still exists on CoinMarketCap and is BitConnect. And for those that don't remember, I have a screenshot of when BitConnect token made it to number 7 on CoinMarketCap. Did you know that, Jimmy? The BitConnect token was number 7.
Well, so I do remember something like that, but that was during our Epic 2017 show when we were doing the SegWit, war stuff. And we noticed that everything went down except for BCC. And at the time, we were speculating that it was because of the confusion around the Bitcoin Cash hard fork, and people were buying BCC because of its. They thought that might be the ticker for Bitcoin Cash instead of BCH. So. But back then on that show, if you remember, I believe it was number 10. I don't quite remember when it went to number 7, but that was pretty much the height of BCC.
Yeah, I remember. I have a screenshot of that. I'm sure I can search for it in my computer. I remember those days. So, I mean, like, we're just keeping an eye on this train wreck. And, like, I don't understand, like, how does Roger Ver still push this? Like, at which point do you think he's ever gonna admit how like stupid his mistake was, or is he just gonna disappear?
Yeah, good question. I'll have a thought about that in 1 minute, but let me just comment on what's going on here. So Haipo Yang is CEO of Via BTC, and if you remember, Via BTC is the mining pool that was invested in heavily by Jihan Wu. And it was actually Haipo Yang that funded Bitcoin ABC, which later became Bitcoin Cash. He funded Amory Sachet. So he's had quite a bit of investment into the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem for a very long time, pretty much got it started. So his departure from the Bitcoin Cash community is actually quite significant. And it looks like the split in this case is not necessarily ideological, but much more geographic. So he's taking the Chinese, people that are for Bitcoin Cash, and he's hoping to bring them with him on this hard fork, while more of the Western Bitcoin Cash people stay in the Western Hemisphere. People like Roger Ver and Peter Risen and Amory Sachet and people like that. Now, the reason why he's doing this fork is because of the infrastructure funding proposal that he did earlier this year, which actually provoked community outrage. He proposed taking some of the mining rewards and funding the Bitcoin Cash developers with it. And basically, Roger signed on to it, but the entire community was absolutely livid. And they rejected the proposal, basically. And so he's now taking his ball and going home. He's going to make his own fork with all the people that want to do something like an infrastructure funding proposal and do it on his own. And indeed, that's if you read later, basically that's what he talks about, is how there's going to be a foundation from the beginning that's going to fund the developers, and how that foundation is somehow going to be decentralized because it's going to follow the will of its users and so on. The thing is, like, the whole cat thing is kind of a nice headline grabber, and I did tweet about it because I do find it hilarious. The big thing about this that I learned from this article is that Hypo just really, well, first of all, there's a lot of unintentional comedy just in the way he writes, because he's obviously not a native English speaker. And, the way he writes is actually kind of like formal, but, it's actually kind of hilarious if you're reading it. The entire thing about like how cat sounds like cash, and how he used to have a cat named Satoshi and things like that, all very unintentionally hilarious. But I don't think he understands what made Dogecoin Doge. The entire thing about Dogecoin was that it didn't take itself seriously at all. And he seems to think that by just attaching the name cat to it, that he could get the same success. Well, good luck, buddy, because I don't think you understand how this whole thing works, or why why Dogecoin was a relative success and so on. But yeah, that said, I think to your question about Roger Ver and why what's it going to take, I have noticed that he's been appearing on like Bitcoin SV shows and stuff like that. I think he's starting to get tired, to be quite frank. And if you do read some of his posts, he's trying to, trying to convince people like Hypo to stay together on Bitcoin Cash. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. I'm Asian, so I think say this. When his infrastructure funding proposal got rejected by the community, I think he was pretty humiliated. And having something such a public humiliation of what he wanted, I think like grates on him quite a bit. And I don't think you're going to be able to convince him to stay with Bitcoin Cash. So,
Jimmy,
who knows
really?
how
You think that's humiliating? He aligned with Craig Wright and Calvin Ayre. And
Yeah,
there's pictures of him like having wide with those guys, like they accomplished something. And
well, I don't know if Hypo had a picture with those guys. But
no, not Hypo. They're about Roger. They're about Roger.
Oh yeah, no. Roger doesn't care about that part.
Roger's trying to keep you're talking about Hypo being embarrassed about the community.
The infrastructure funding
okay.
plan.
No, I misunderstood what you were saying. I thought you were talking about Roger. Okay.
No. So I do think this split is going to happen. The big question for me is whether or not Jihan Wu will follow Hypo, because Jihan basically funded via BTC. Is a giant investor in there, and basically through the back door funded the Bitcoin Cash experiment and everything else. But Hypo Yang, he's kind of going off on his own. Where does Jihan go? If he goes with Hypo, then the East-West split is definite. And at that point,
I hope he does. I hope he does, because if Jihan goes with Hypo, BCash becomes 3 centralized coins. While in the very beginning, when it was all of them, right, like Hypo and Jihan and Roger and Calvin and Craig, and they had like a fair amount, they had about a dozen developers. But now, if Jihan joins Hypo, even back then when we used to cover this, when Via BTC first came out, it was obvious to us that it was just a fully funded subsidiary of Bitmain to pretend like it's not the same hashing power. So if Jihan joins Hypo here and they go off and make their own coin, it's obviously a centralized Chinese coin, because they have all the mining, they have control of the code, they have all facets of it locked. And we all know that Craig Wright and Calvin Ayre have full control of Bitcoin SV. And now Roger is literally the only guy left in control and the funding, and it's only Bitcoin.com's pool. So all of a sudden, by these guys leaving, they're not only creating their own centralized altcoin, but by them leaving, what remains is now completely Roger's centralized coin.
Well, I mean, you still, I think, have Amaris Shea, who I don't know. At some point, I think we'll split with Roger as well. But you know that there's still a lot of characters in Bitcoin Cash.
Yeah, but it was a shame. But he's a developer, right? He's not influencing the media. He's not. Yeah, he doesn't.
Well, I mean, he's saying a lot of stuff, and he describes himself as a shitlord for a reason. And he's been. I don't know. He's not he was pro infrastructure funding plan when it first came out, and there's a lot of people in the BCH.
But the point is this: this disaster, this laughable disaster, this clown show will continue to fork until it's a centralized dictatorship, right? This is the.
It kind of is already in many ways. So. Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that it's centralized and has been for a long time. The question is how many people will follow Hypo, and this is something that I think we don't really know the answer to, because we don't know how much of BCH support comes from China and Asia and where Bitcoin Cat is popular, versus the US and Europe and other places. So. It's an interesting question, and November 15th is the day of reckoning, and I honestly wonder what it's going to look like. The other parts of the article, Hypo promises pretty much everything, right? Like faster block times, different proof of work. Like they're going to have new opcodes for different smart contracts and all sorts of things. So this is what every fork has done, though. So I have no idea if they'll actually implement it, but that's.
I got one last question for you, Jimmy, before we move on. So, like, this gotta piss off the exchanges, right? Like, like how many exchanges are gonna go? You know what? Screw you guys. We are delisting BCH. Everyone, get your shitcoin off of here, because we're not going to be responsible for splitting this garbage.
Yeah, and I've talked to several CEOs that are thinking exactly that, because they're like, okay, we don't get that much business in BCH in the first place, and now we're going to have to like deal with this fork and everything else. It might not be worth it, especially if you have limited engineering resources. You have to run a brand new client that you haven't run before. Who knows like what the security profile of it is. And you have to isolate it and make sure everyone's balances are there at the right time, and then credit them, or else you get sued. I mean, if I were an exchange, what I would say is get your coins off this exchange by November 1st. We will not be supporting anything past that, and BCH, and that way I don't have to deal with this fork happening November 15th.
Though I gotta say, BCat is a cooler name than BCash.
Yeah, BCash.
It just seems that this is a war of egos. The initial Bitcoin Cash split was, with Craig Wright and Roger Ver and Jihan, Hypo. And now, what are we seeing now? Another war of egos between the Asian contingent? Is that what's happening right now?
Yeah, I mean, Roger and Craig actually came in a little bit later. So I wouldn't say Roger fully jumped in until 2x was over. He was pro 2x most of that time. And then he went over to BCH after that. So I would say that, like in a sense, BCH has always been, or has its origins in Asia. So they're sort of taking it back, and, going back to the BCC ticker is kind of, in that same spirit, like go back to what it was back in August of 2017 and the vision that they had, instead of it being sort of hijacked by the Westerners. I'm sure that's sort of the perspective that Hypo and maybe even Jihan has. So in that sense, I can kind of see what they're doing or why they're doing and their rationale.
But it's going to be a giant cluster, because they can't actually get the BCC ticker, because CoinMarketCap still references BCC to BitConnect. So if they now re-reference it to BCat, then we're not going to have, the history of the stupid of BitConnect as it goes to number 7 and historical CoinMarketCap charts. So I'm sorry, but he's not going to be able to get BCC.
I mean, it depends on the exchange, right? I mean, I'm sure they're gonna lobby, CZ
Look,
to
there's
list
always
it as
money,
BCC.
right? The answer to all your questions is money.
Yeah. Oh, and that's another thing about Hypo. He commented in a tweet that he might be willing to go take all of the coins that haven't moved since the BCH hard fork, and just take them and use them for more mining rewards, which I interpret to mean like, okay, that way I'm gonna get more BCH and use that to, you know, as a slush fund to go bribe exchanges or something.
Interesting. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what the exchanges do, but we see these forks driving these coins further into irrelevancy again and again. Taking a look at another type of shitcoin or altcoin, or whatever you want to call it, blockchain to play essential role in farming supply chain, says the US government. So we have the US Department of Agriculture saying that it expects blockchain will become a key component in supply chain management and traceability. In the Federal Register last week, the Agricultural Marketing Services, the Department of Agriculture Standardization and Testing Authority, said distributed ledger technology, which includes blockchain, will likely play an essential role in complex supply chains. Businesses can use DLT to track a single item in real time in a secure, verifiable, and transparent way. The agency added many modern DLT solutions are permissioned, confidential, and business sensitive information is only disclosed to authorized entities. Supply chain management is already an established use case for blockchain, like the likes of Daimler, Tesla, and Amazon have all explored using DLT in theirs. GrainChain, a blockchain platform tracing agricultural products, raised $5 million in a funding round earlier this year. The US Air Force renewed a tech contractor's mandate in June to assess the value of using blockchain for its own military supply chain. And so we look at this GrainChain. Overstock's VC wing leads 8.2 million funding round in GrainChain. GrainChain, a commodities tracing platform that uses smart contracts to open up liquidity for low-income farmers, has raised 8.2 million in its latest funding round. The company announced, but this was back in March. Chief Executive and founder Louis Macias said the money will bolster GrainChain's burgeoning operations in Mexico, Honduras, and the southwest of the United States. This funding is really going to allow us to add to our operations and scale up levels that we are anticipating, giving us the ability to implement across the entire supply chain. Overstock VC wing Medici Ventures contributed the bulk at $5 million, an earlier backer of GrainChain with a $2.5 million equity stake in late 2018. Medici had previously agreed to consider purchasing future equity. It now controls 17.65% of GrainChain, according to a Medici spokesperson. All right, Jimmy, first question to you. What do you think of this expansion into enterprise blockchains?
I mean, I think some bureaucrat got hoodwinked by a slick talking salesman. I mean, essentially what they're saying is this technology is going to help us in some way. And that first story, if you think about it, you have to think about you know, the press release from the bureaucrat's perspective. What is their goal? What do they want? Essentially, whenever you see a press release from a U.S. government agency, it almost always benefits some bureaucrat somewhere. And in this particular case, it's some bureaucrat in some agricultural department that wants to look good in front of their bosses, and their bosses want to look good in front of their bosses, and so on. Essentially, it's a way for them to promote the idea that they are doing something good and useful. Sad fact of the matter is that they're usually not doing anything good and useful. So they will cling to almost any story that has a hint of giving them good press, including you know, using quote unquote blockchain technology, except of course, bureaucrats are not necessarily known for keeping up with actual technological innovation. So they just listen to whoever manages to wine them and dine them. And that is indeed what seems to have happened here. They released something in the press saying, oh, blockchain will have a future in supply chain. I guarantee you, none of these guys know what the hell a blockchain is. And the people that sold it to them probably said it's some box that does something magical, and or some equivalent of something like that. And indeed, that's basically what GrainChain probably is. It's a magic box that does something. Nobody knows actually what it does. And it's probably unbuildable, and either that or what might be even more interesting is if they are using blockchain as an excuse. They actually have a different product and they're just slapping the label blockchain as a way to get investment from companies like Medici Ventures. But yeah, regardless, it's a ridiculous project. Blockchain, I mean, we've been talking about blockchain on this show for a long time, and we haven't seen a single use case that makes any sense whatsoever. It makes sense for Bitcoin because it's money and it's better when it doesn't change. For anything else like supply chain management, think about all the updates and upgrades and changes that you need to make to that kind of software on a constant basis. It's not a good fit. And anyone telling you otherwise is trying to sell you something and scam you out of your money.
All right, I have been on these enterprise blockchain panels, and they seem to, like companies like Monsanto, they're getting, I think, consulting contracts with Ant Financial. They're trying to make these DLTs. They're trying to track their supply chains and make it more efficient. But what are your thoughts, Tone?
Yeah, the last thing Monsanto wants is a blockchain so that we can actually see all the transactions that Monsanto is doing. So yeah, we throw these stories into almost every show just to continue to point out on every show that the use case for a blockchain, other than what it's currently used for in Bitcoin, is generally silly. And sometimes it takes weeks to figure out how silly it is, like in the case of the DAO. And sometimes it takes multiple years to figure out how silly it is, like in the case of Ethereum itself. So it's a matter of time. I've never heard of GrainChain before, but clearly they're just using the buzzwords. They will never be able to build what they're promising they're building with some kind of, again, a magical smart contract that's going to suddenly create transparency and responsibility in your supply chain, because your blockchain is only as good as the data going into it. And it doesn't make that data true just because it's in the blockchain.
All right. Taking a look at our next story, this curious question of the Ethereum supply. So as told in a couple of tweets, we're gonna show you, Pierre Rochard. We can debate hard cap, but summing up present ETH total supply is a challenge. I had to put up bounty to even get a first iteration. We do see this tweet from Vitalik. The present supply chain is clearly known. Here it is. What you're looking for is verification that the consensus rules were followed, which you can do by running one of these multiple implementations.
Can you click on that tweet, the Vitalik's tweet? Like,
yeah.
No, the tweet itself. Yeah. No, just the tweet. Yeah. Nope, you're highlighting. Yeah, perfect. And where's Samson's reply? On my end, Samson's reply came back first. So if you scroll down, there's been a lot of replies. I guess they're ordered differently. Basically, the joke there was that Vitalik did not just use a third-party website to validate how many Ethereum there are. But yeah, sorry, go on with the rest of it. This has just became a joke. It's kind of funny, the whole thing.
All right, breaking news. It's the year 2070. The world's most powerful computer still fails to calculate the historic supply of the defunct relict database project called Ethereum, which ceased to exist in 2027. We have this breaking news on CNN, this nice old photo of Vitalik with his unicorn sweater in old age. World's most powerful computer still fails to determine Ethereum supply 50 years after supply gate. Headline for the possible future. We also have this one, supply gate scandal. All right, let's save the screen grab. I will respond again in 1 year. How many Bitcoiners know that in about a year, Ethereum issuance will be much lower than BTC? Ethereum 2 chain will be used to finalize the power of work chain, so issuance can be dropped up to 90%. And then we have a tweet from Tone. Maybe you can jump in and explain this one, Tone.
If you just look on that chart, because like like the graph itself, and like I'm looking at this, the issuance rate of Ethereum, and I wasn't even sure if someone was making a joke or that's the actual graph of the issuance of Ethereum, the yellow part. And it just reminded me of a chart I saw years ago. So I went over and found it, and it's basically your projected career path and your actual career path, and that yellow part. And the yellow part in between is why people drink alcohol. But yeah.
And in that case, then the Ethereum people must be drinking a lot of alcohol.
So that what
it's completely anti-correlated at this point.
So when I saw that issuance rate in yellow, that's just the chart that reminded me of that I saw back in the day. And I think we have one more tweet on this from somebody.
All right, Pierre Richard. Literally nobody cares about the supply of Ethereum.
No, because nobody does.
Yeah, basic due diligence has to audit the entire ecosystem like a weird narc. Buy a big bag of Ethereum and STFUs. Stop cashing in cloud on something so trivial. Literally nobody cares about the supply of Ethereum. Jump on Uniswap, buy an alt token, make 10 times your return. Put this argument to rest.
And if you scroll down, I replied to Pierre. If you click on Pierre's, there it is. So I actually, the other day, on my podcast in the morning, on a price podcast, I talked about just that. I talked about how in the world of shitcoins, no one cares about the technology. They claim they care about it. They tell you to read the white paper that it's about the technology. But no one cares about the technology when it comes to anything other than Bitcoin. All they care about is getting rich. They want to convince you that the technology is relevant just so you can buy their coins from them at the top. Now, that also applies to those that are working on these projects. Now, they want to get paid for working on these projects. But at the end of the day, you give them more money to work on another shitcoin, and they will quit and go and work on another shitcoin. So if you are really in it for the technology in this altcoin, I really question that you may not understand what exactly is going on, because everyone around you is only in it to make money. And Chainlink is one of the best examples in that most people are telling you that Chainlink is the future of everything and decentralized oracles. There's maybe a dozen people that actually use Chainlink and thousands of people that are invested in Chainlink. So tell me, how in the world does the technology matter when 12 people use it and like 1,000 people are speculating? I'll hand it off to Jimmy from here.
Yeah, so this whole supply gate thing is in a way really indicative, and in many other ways also really sad, because really all Pierre wanted to do was find out how many ETH there was. And, I mean, how do I independently verify this? And, basically a lot of Ethereum people, kind of were like, hey, you're just trolling, and he's not, I'm actually, if you don't know, Pierre is actually an accountant by training. And this is what auditors do, is find out how much of something there is and try to get an independent audit and verify certain things. So he was like, this is what I do for a living. Just tell me how many there are. And it turned out that there was no RPC call, no easy way to, like, even if you were able to get a full node up and running in Ethereum, there was no way to, figure out how many there were, at least not easily. So, various people throughout the weekend were saying, okay, well, you could write a script to go figure this out if you're running your own Ethereum node, which, by the way, he's now gone down, because he's like, okay, well, all right, since nobody can tell me, I'm going to go run my own node and try to run these scripts. And he priced up the computer that it would take in order to do it, and something like $2,600 so far. And that's with 16 gigabytes of RAM. I am almost positive he's going to need probably 64 or something on that order. And he has
I remember
larger hard.
Jameson Lab trying to set up an Ethereum node. Other people have tried, and it is like embarrassing how hard it is.
So the thing about Ethereum nodes is because their blocks are so fast, and you have to process just so much data. You can't sync with a normal hard drive. You have to actually have a solid state drive, and using that you can catch up because the disk writes are not going to be bound. So essentially, that's what Pierre is attempting to do. But they wrote in the script, and he's like, okay, well, how do you know the script is correct? Because the amounts that the scripts came back with were different than what was on CoinMarketCap, and like everyone started noticing, okay, the amount on CoinMarketCap is different than Etherscan, and what's on Etherscan is different. Like, how do you know what's the actual amount? Like, this is, very basic question that any auditor would ask. And, he kept going with it, and they were like, well, it's complicated, and this is absolutely true. It is complicated because in Ethereum.
But it's not supposed to be complicated. That's
so I think it's actually purposefully complicated because the reason why it's so hard to compute the supply is one, and Antonopoulos had a long thread on this, and if you read it, it's actually very informative as to why it's hard to calculate the supply. One, Bitcoin uses the UTXO model, so either coins are spent or unspent. So it's very easy to just add up all the unspent coins, and you have the supply right there. That's very easy. With Ethereum, it's an account-based system. So for any address, what you have to do is go through every transaction that address has been involved in. And in Ethereum, you reuse addresses all the time. That's how you're supposed to use it. So what you have to do is sum up all of those, and then you can find out how much it is. So it's not obvious at any one point, like how much is in any address. And they do all sorts of tricks to try to make that a little more efficient, but it's not trivial by any means to verify that. Number two, they reward something called uncle. So unlike Bitcoin, where you just reward the miner that found proof of work, in Ethereum, if two miners find a block at the same time, the one who's got the longest chain gets some amount, but somebody else that also found it gets a reward called an uncle reward.
So in Bitcoin, like the orphan blocks get some kind of reward, basically.
Yeah, basically. So they're not orphans anymore, right? Because they're still kind of related, at least, and that's, I think, why they call it an uncle. And to make that even more complicated, if the uncle has a child, then you also reward the nephew. So oftentimes what you end up getting are these reward schedules that the rewards that are completely like unpredictable, because at any block you could have like 30 uncles, in which case you have to pay out every uncle. And you have more inflation for that block than you would any other block.
Starting to sound like Ponzi schemes, right? Like, well, like MLM Ponzi's, because like, well, you get a percentage of this, but if those people bring in more people, you get a percentage of them too.
Well, it's not quite like that, but hey, there's a lot of people, a lot of miners that put, like, it gets more complicated. And in addition to that, there's this difficulty bomb that they've been having, and that's the graph that you showed earlier, Christine, is that there is this issuance schedule that goes herky-jerky. It's completely changed every time they have a hard fork, and this is why there's so many like labels there, because each time was a hard fork and they decided that the issuance schedule would change for some reason, or they forgot to change it in the case of the difficulty bomb that happened in the past, last winter. So calculating all of this is not trivial in the least. So there's a lot of reasons why calculating the supply of Ethereum is very difficult. But all that is to say that it is extremely difficult to calculate because they added all of these features that actually aren't kind of necessary in order to quote unquote make Ethereum work and everything like that. So in a sense, you don't know the complete supply of Ethereum. And this is the last point I'll make, which is that if you don't know the entire supply of Ethereum, and you can't independently audit that very easily, and you know, I think Pierre actually paid for a couple of scripts that do that, but you know, how are you going to check that these scripts work? Well, my question then is, how do you know what your balance is? How do you know what your balance is? So say you have 10 Ethereum. How do you know that you actually have 10 Ethereum? Because if you know the balance of every address, then calculating the supply is trivial. You just add them all up. It's very easy. That's, I mean, then you would know. But the fact that you can't calculate the supply very easily, the entire supply very easily, means that at least some of those addresses are very difficult to calculate. And in fact, most people don't rely on their own Ethereum node to calculate how much Ethereum they have. They rely on Ether's block explorer or something like that. In which case, it's like, okay, well, soon as that block explorer stops telling you that you have 10 and it suddenly says 8, you just lost two Ethereum, right? Like, this is something that they totally can do and you might not even be aware of. And this is the problem with not being able to run your own full node and verify things for yourself, is that the central authority can essentially take it away. And in this case, there's multiple central authorities and multiple single points of failure that can take away your Ethereum. And this is why I think this whole supply gate thing sort of illustrates for us the weaknesses of centralization. And you know, I mean, they call themselves decentralized for many things, but it's all just sort of decentralization theater. They're completely centralized, and this episode has shown it in many, many ways.
And who's controlling the issuance of the supply?
Mostly Vitalik Buterin. Whenever he feels like it, he'll lower it or heighten it or whatever. Yeah, I mean, again, like the right side of this graph right here, Ethereum 2.0, phase 1.5 and stuff like that, none of that's happened yet. I highly doubt it'll drop off a cliff like that. And if it does, that would be very strange. And you know, they basically kind of make it up as they go along. It's not very different than, say, what the Fed does, right? With its you know, quarterly meetings or whatever, is they decide on the interest rate policy and you know, how wide open the discount window is and so on. That's basically what Ethereum is doing. And this is why the graph looks so retarded, is that it's you know, they do whatever they fancy at the moment. Whereas with Bitcoin, it's very predictable. No one's changed the supply schedule, and you know, that's kind of the point, is that no one's in control. Ethereum, there's a central bank that's controlling the supply, basically.
Hey, real quick, Jimmy, it's been a while since I've done my Ethereum research. Are there blocks every 12 seconds or 3 seconds? I don't remember.
I think it's 12 seconds. So something.
I think it's 12 seconds and like 3 Ethereum or something, right?
Yeah, well, that constantly changes, so I have no idea right now. So, like, it literally changes every hard fork. And so, and you know, there's this difficulty bomb, and it's an equation, and all this other stuff. And yeah, I mean, this is what you know, central bank of Vitalik looks like, I guess.
And what else was I gonna say? Oh, damn. We had actually a good question. Bitcoin for Girls asks, because of something I said earlier. She said, how many are using ETH for its purpose versus those just trading a coin? Unfortunately, the majority of the people are actually using Ethereum for its purpose, because most people that trade Ethereum are also trading shitcoins. And if you're actually going to move shitcoins, you need to have Ethereum to move the shitcoin.
Yeah, and a lot of the people that are using Ethereum right now, they're putting it into DeFi contracts and so on. And we know what DeFi contracts are. They're zero-sum games, right? It's more or less gambling. It's you know, heads I win or tails I lose, something like that. Except, you know, the people that are getting into it have no idea what the heck's going on. So guess who's going to come out the winner? It's the people that created the protocol and the people that got in early and so on. So yeah, it's a giant casino, basically. And you know, good luck to anyone that's doing it. But that's where we are at the moment.
I personally have never used Ethereum because I've never held an ICO or anything like that. So I've never had a need for it. That's it. Enough Ethereum talk.
All right. For our final story, we have MicroStrategy, adopts Bitcoin as primary treasury reserve asset. So we have an announcement from MicroStrategy Incorporated, the largest independent publicly traded business intelligence company, announcing that it has purchased over 21,000 Bitcoins at an aggregate purchase price of $250 million, inclusive of fees and expenses. The purchase of Bitcoin cryptocurrency was made pursuant to the two-pronged capital allocation strategy previously announced by the company when it released its second quarter 2020 financial results in July 28th of this year. The company addressed the first prong, which called for returning a portion of its excess cash to shareholders. It announced today it had launched a cash tender, blah, 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 blah. Our investment in Bitcoin is part of our new capital allocation strategy, which seeks to maximize long-term value for our shareholders, according to the CEO of MicroStrategy, Michael Saylor. This investment reflects our belief that Bitcoin, as the world's most widely adopted cryptocurrency, is a dependable store of value and an attractive investment asset with more long-term appreciation potential than holding cash. Since its inception over a decade ago, Bitcoin has emerged as a significant addition to the global financial system with characteristics that are useful to both individuals and institutions. MicroStrategy has recognized Bitcoin as a legitimate investment asset that can be superior to cash and accordingly has made Bitcoin the principal holding in its treasury reserve strategy. A bit about MicroStrategy. They're a leader in business intelligence. MicroStrategy has a 30-year history of anticipating technology trends. MicroStrategy was one of the first companies in the enterprise business intelligence software sector. It was a pioneer in relational analytics, web intelligence, and mobile intelligence, and has most recently invented hyper-intelligence, zero-click insights that can be embedded in applications to make them smarter, faster, and stronger. So this is a big investment. Jimmy, what do you find about its significance in making this huge investment in Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, 21,000 Bitcoins. That's 1/1000th of all Bitcoins that could ever be. Think about that. 1/1000th of all Bitcoins that can ever be. So they have 10 basis points of all Bitcoins that could ever exist. Which is absolutely staggering. And this, I pointed out this in a tweet earlier today, but basically this is why, this is the killer feature for Bitcoin, is the store of value aspect. And that is exactly what these guys are using it for. Now, why would they do this? Well, because they have cash sitting around and they want to make that cash productive. They're using Bitcoin as a reserve asset or as a way to store value. They know that the dollar is being printed to oblivion. If they keep it in the dollar, that they're going to lose value. Whereas if they keep it in Bitcoin, that it has a chance of rising in value and that it will end up being very good for their company. And if you think about it, like think about how many people that, or how many times that Roger must have gone into these various companies to try to sell them on Bitcoin as a method of payment, right? Like he basically, from what I know of him, he's basically gone to every retail store and begged them to use Bitcoin. And of course, maybe once in a while they'll take him up on it, but then 6 months later they've had 2 sales in Bitcoin and they stop. Or that was the early case.
Retraining low-level employees to accept crypto payments is a disaster. I've tried it because I've had employees. Like you can't. Your turnover is too high, and if no one is coming in every day to spend it, you're going to be training and you're going to be retraining employees and training every new employee. It's a disaster.
Yeah. So I mean, think about it. All of that effort that Roger spent on trying to make it method of payment for Bitcoin Cash, for example, it hasn't actually made Bitcoin Cash more useful, right? Like no one's actually adopting it and so on. One company takes up 10 basis points of all Bitcoin that could ever exist, right? You get a couple of hundred companies like this. That's a fifth of all Bitcoin that'll ever exist, like going as reserve assets. That's an insane amount of money that would be stored in Bitcoin in that case. So in that way, I think this is the future. And if MicroStrategy does this and is successful, I mean, every corporation is going to be looking into doing this, or at least having some exposure with their cash balance sheet. We know companies like Apple have like many hundreds of billions in cash just sitting there, and they know that this is, that money is losing purchasing power daily as the Fed continues to print money. So what are they going to do with it? Well, they could try to invest in other things or buy back stock or something like that. But I think this is the right way to go. And I look forward to seeing more stories like this. And notice that they didn't use Ethereum as a reserve asset.
I'm just gonna.
Yeah, they got a whole section on that. It was in considering various asset classes. That paragraph right at the top, Christine. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
and considering various asset classes for potential investment, MicroStrategy observed distinctive properties of Bitcoin that led it to believe investing in the cryptocurrency would provide not only a reasonable hedge against inflation, but also the prospect of earning a higher return than other investments. Mr. Saylor articulated the opinion: we find the global acceptance, brand recognition, ecosystem vitality, network dominance, architectural resilience, technical utility, and community ethos of Bitcoin to be persuasive evidence of its superiority as an asset class for those seeking a long-term store of value. Bitcoin is digital gold, harder, stronger, faster, and smarter than any money that has preceded it. We expect its value to accrete with advances in technology, expanding adoption, and the network effect that has fueled the rise of so many category killers in the modern era. And it is interesting, Jimmy, you mentioned the state of money in the US right now, where the Fed is just plowing money, printing money into the financial system. And we have a case where some investors are saying, this is a time where we should start investing in another type of currency. Tony, you want to weigh in on there?
Sure, but speaking of them investing only in Bitcoin, I wonder if they read this article I just sent you, Christine. If you want to pull that up right next to it, it's in our Telegram chat.
Yeah.
So I'm going back. I'm reading some useful articles right there. So if you want to pull that up, which is a very good read, by the way.
Oh, we've got a Jimmy Song article, Why Cryptocurrency Diversification Makes Little Sense.
So that's a great article. I should probably add that to the video description. And which I actually don't remember if I filled out for this show. So I may have to go back and do that. Jimmy does a very good job at explaining why diversifying within the crypto space makes absolutely no sense. You just, if you're looking for a long-term investment, you put it in Bitcoin, you leave it there. And that's the one trade or the one investment that makes sense. This is, of course, great. I will say that I'm sure this was not an easy decision on the part of a company, because this does take on many, many risks. Now, one of those risks is now they have to protect those coins. Their CTO or their other IT guys, they got to have some checks and balances, right? Because it can be the death of a company if next month, someone walks away with that 20,000 Bitcoin. So they better be real careful about how it's being protected. That's the most important part. And that's why this is not going to be an easy decision for the government. The other thing is, I'm waiting for the day where if the employees of the company start asking, can they be paid in Bitcoin? And that's when we start going full circle. If the company has Bitcoin, will they allow their employees to be paid in Bitcoin if they would rather be paid in Bitcoin? It would make it a lot easier for them to pay their international employees, hiring someone in India, hiring someone in Africa, and pay them with Bitcoin. Will they see the use cases of Bitcoin besides store of value? Because there are additional use cases. They're just not as important or not as popular. So that's what I'm really hoping for going into the future. But this is great.
We have just a comment from the audience. What do you think about having Bitcoin in the hands of institutions? Is that bad for BTC in the long run?
No. Why would it be? I mean, some of them are going to dump whenever the price goes up or down. But I think using it in this way, especially as a reserve asset, is perfectly fine. It does open up the possibility of the government being able to seize it for some reason, and then then the government might be able to manipulate the price or something like that. But that's that's what you get with something that's decentralized. Is if you work hard at it, you can get a lot of it. So it's definitely possible.
But doesn't this make it harder for the government to seize this company's assets, right? So right now, if all of that money was in US dollars sitting in banks all around the world, and the government all of a sudden decided to take this company down, it's very easy for them to seize their assets, especially if a new regime gets elected that wants to, create socialism and take, hey, your company has too much money, we're going to take some of that. This makes it a lot more challenging for the government to seize assets of the company. And sure, individual people of that company might get arrested, but at the same time, you can run companies while being in non-extradition countries. Though the other thing I was thinking about earlier is like a lot of, because of Bitcoin and because of like this, the more and more people start working remotely, these some of the tax advantages may start to go away because like in the US, it doesn't matter where you live, you get taxed anyway as an American citizen. But if you're Canadian, if you don't live or work in Canada, Canada doesn't tax you. But I think that might change in the future, where they're going to say, well, hey, the majority of our population are working from home anyway, so we're going to tax them. So I think that the angle of it's going to be harder for the government to confiscate our money if they don't like us will also resonate with a lot of institutions.
Yeah, another question we have is, how did they get their hands on so much Bitcoin? Like, are there some really lucky over-the-counter broker, or?
This must have taken all year to pull off.
Yeah, I'm sure they took a while to accumulate that much, and that's not an easy amount to be able to accumulate. But I mean, 5,000 Bitcoin will move the market significantly. So 20,000 Bitcoin probably moved the market four times.
And we did see the market move significantly over the last few months when they were probably accumulating this. I'm sure they've gone through OTC. I mean, there is Barry Silbert that does this, and Kraken does this, and
there's 100 OTC desks, and they have very competitive rates depending on size and so on. So,
and I'm sure they use multiple OTC desks.
Yeah, and they probably dollar cost averaged as well.
Oh yeah.
All that's very good, and I suspect that like every podcaster out there is trying to get an interview with the CEO of MicroStrategy and see if they can find out like what led them to do this and see if it's something that other companies are also considering.
Yeah.
Maybe I should send them an email.
Yeah. That's a good transition to the mempool. Jimmy, take it away. What's going on with our Bitcoin transactions?
Well, like I said, over the weekend, all of the 2 Satoshi per byte transactions cleared. And in fact, all of the 1 Satoshi per byte transactions cleared over the weekend. But Monday brought a lot more transactions, most of which cleared overnight. You can see that it cleared down to 2 or 3 Satoshis per byte. The ones are staying around. Right now, we're seeing a little bit of unusual activity in the sense that usually you have that high spike during the day, but that giant red blob there, which is the 90 to 100 Satoshi per byte, that was in the mempool for a while. We're seeing an uptick right now, which is a little bit strange. It might be due to some price action that's happening or something like that. But something's going on right now, and usually it doesn't happen this late in the day. So I'm not sure exactly what it is. But I suspect that overnight we'll see some of the drawdown in the mempool. If you need to get it in the next block or so, you're going to have to pay 90 to 100. If you can wait like a few hours, I suspect you can get in for 15 to 20. And if you're willing to wait overnight, I'll bet you could get in for 5 or 6.
All right, cool. And we want to remind our viewers, Programming Bitcoin by Jimmy Sung is available for purchase. Learn how to program a Bitcoin library with this hands-on guide from one of the leading teachers on Bitcoin and Bitcoin programming. Author Jimmy Song shows you the basics, including the math, blocks, network, and transactions behind this popular cryptocurrency and its blockchain payment system. You'll also learn how simplified payment verification and how proof of work works. Learn how to program Bitcoin from scratch. Programming Bitcoin by Jimmy Sung. Also check out his Medium article page for learning all about why cryptocurrency diversification makes little sense. Thank you very much, Jimmy. And we also have our price analysis from Tone. We see the markets in the United States are down. Bitcoin is down. Tesla's splitting its stock. What's going on?
Yeah, Apple is going to have its split coming up soon as well. So I did do a show this morning. Please tell me my screen share is working.
It's working.
Perfect. So I did do a show this morning on price, and I put this blue line in there. And I said, hey, if we cross below this blue line, things are not looking very good for Bitcoin. A few hours later, we did cross below the blue line. We closed below the blue line. We're currently on a 4-hour candle that is rallying, but I think a lot of damage has been done. And I'm not as optimistic about Bitcoin at the moment. Bitcoin needed to get back above $12,050 in order to take off to that $14,000 range. Now that we are back below 11,400, I am not as optimistic. I will remain pessimistic on the price of Bitcoin until we break $12,050. So this is the 4-hour chart. The 4-hour chart is starting to turn the daily chart. Now the daily chart doesn't mean much. I still have this giant arrow to 14K, but the next candle will show us what is happening. Now, there's other reasons why I'm a little pessimistic about the price of Bitcoin. First of all, gold looks like it has topped. I talked about gold topping this week with the high last week. I started talking about it last week. So here we are. The MRI is calling for a momentum top in gold this week. This is the weekly chart of gold, and down we go. If I flip to the daily chart, I didn't know which day this week we were going to top. I thought that we may last later in the week, but clearly we topped right here at the end of last week. Lots of metrics here on both daily and weekly that were giving the right warning. The S&P 500 was topped yesterday. So topped on Monday. So Monday was the top. This is the futures chart. Let's go to the cash chart, probably easier. So Monday marked the top of the S&P. This morning, we were rallying. We were almost at all-time high. We were 0.5% away from the all-time high. I was a little bit, it's not that I'm invested, but I do like the indicators because I'm all about TA and indicators. So I was a little disappointed this morning that the MRI indicator did not mark the top properly. But here I am looking at the end of day, and it sure as hell did, because I never trade the day following a top or the candle following a top. I always let this candle run, and if the next candle goes higher, I say, hey, we didn't top, and up we go. And other than that, it looks like the S&P 500 has also topped, at least for a correction. And now I am looking for a correction down to the $3,300 range. Well, we're already at 33.30, so more like 32.50 range, back to this moving average. I know it's not a lot, but I think we can fall another 100 points on the S&P. The NASDAQ also had a top. It had a more clear top on the weekly NASDAQ. That topped last week, and you can see this week we are starting to go down. So lots of metrics on tops on both NASDAQ, S&P, gold, and Bitcoin is not that different. I mean, Bitcoin is still correlated with a lot of these other risky assets. So I'm not surprised that Bitcoin is taking a little bit of a hit, but I'm still pretty bullish on Bitcoin. I don't really expect it to go below 10K, but yeah, we can pull back here a little bit. That's my view on the markets.
Interesting seeing the S&P 500 test that record high.
Almost made it.
Resistance.
I mean, the
Yeah, almost made it.
NASDAQ crushed all-time high. The NASDAQ was almost 20% above prior all-time high, but the S&P was like maybe 40 points shy.
And we see the futures are up now, so tomorrow's another day. All right. Thank you guys very much for joining us. This is Tuesday, August 11th edition of Bitcoin Brief. We have our Tone Vays, our crypto trader, educator, as well as consultant, and we have, as well as the host of the Financial Summit in Bali, we have Jimmy Song, the author of Programming Bitcoin, talking about all things technically related to Bitcoin. I'm Christine, your host and journalist in New York.
Thanks, guys. See you all on the next one. And
Fiat Delenda Est, this song is done.